Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom wasn't just another adventure sequel, it was a troubled production born from personal pain that forever changed how movies are rated in America. While audiences thrilled at Indy's escape from a plummeting plane using an inflatable raft, behind the scenes the cast was enduring real danger. From Harrison Ford's devastating spinal injury that nearly paralyzed him, to Kate Capshaw being covered with 2,000 live insects while battling genuine phobias, to a production so physically grueling that several crew members collapsed from heat exhaustion in the Sri Lankan jungle. Today we're diving into 20 weird facts about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that reveal why this film was perhaps the most chaotic entry in the beloved franchise. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking truth about the real-life cult that inspired the film's villains that Spielberg refuses to discuss to this day. Hit that play button and let's uncover what really happened in the Temple of Doom. The dark origins. What audiences didn't know while watching Temple of Doom's disturbing human sacrifices and child slavery was that the film's shocking darkness emerged directly from its creator's personal pain. Both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were experiencing bitter divorces during the film's development. Lucas was separating from his wife Marcia after 14 years of marriage, while Spielberg's relationship with Amy Irving was disintegrating. "I was going through a divorce. Steven had broken up with his girlfriend, and we were not in a good mood," Lucas later admitted. "That's why Temple of Doom is so dark. It reflects what we were feeling." The script wasn't crafted to continue Indy's adventures. It was built as a vessel for two Hollywood titans to process their emotional trauma. The heart-ripping scene wasn't just shocking imagery, it was symbolic of what both men felt they were experiencing in their personal lives. The film doesn't just show physical torture, it emerged from genuine emotional torment, the spinal disaster. Harrison Ford didn't just play a hero on screen, he became one off-screen by continuing to film despite a catastrophic injury that should have ended production. While riding an elephant in Sri Lanka, Ford aggravated an old back injury from his carpentry days. It wasn't minor discomfort, it was a ruptured spinal disc that left him unable to stand. Ford was flown from Sri Lanka to Los Angeles for emergency surgery, but refused to delay production for recovery. "I had about 6 weeks of just lying flat on my back," Ford recalled. "When I came back, I was in a corset under my costume." Spielberg restructured the shooting schedule around Ford's condition, filming scenes where Indy was seated or stationary. That grimace you see when Indy punches the massive thuggy guard, it's not acting, it's genuine pain from a man who should have been in a hospital bed rather than on a movie set. Ford's dedication nearly cost him his ability to walk. The rating revolution. Temple of Doom didn't just disturb audiences, it literally broke the American film rating system. The scene where Molaram rips the still-beating heart from a sacrifice's chest shocked parents who had brought young children to what they thought would be a light adventure like Raiders. Spielberg himself admitted he wouldn't let his kids watch certain parts. The MPAA faced a dilemma. The film wasn't graphic enough for an R rating, but was too intense for PG. There was no middle ground in 1984. "Steven called me and said we've got a problem," recalled then MPAA President Jack Valenti. "Young kids are going to get scared out of their wits." Spielberg suggested a new intermediate rating. Just weeks after Temple of Doom's release, the PG-13 rating was born, not just another movie rating, but a fundamental shift in how films were classified, all because one film dared to push boundaries that the industry wasn't prepared to handle. The Insect Nightmare. Kate Capshaw's ear-piercing screams when covered with insects weren't just good acting, they were genuine terror. Capshaw suffered from severe entomophobia, fear of insects, a fact she initially hid from Spielberg to secure the role. When the director revealed she would need to be covered with thousands of live beetles and cockroaches for multiple takes, Capshaw nearly quit. I was beside myself, Capshaw later revealed. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was genuine phobia-level terror. What viewers don't realize is that the Beatles were so aggressive they began drawing blood, leaving Capshaw with numerous small cuts. The costume department had to redesign her outfit with secret protective barriers after she suffered a panic attack during the first attempt. Spielberg, impressed by her commitment, shortened the scene from the original script, which called for even more insect interaction. The cameraman later admitted that during filming, several insects disappeared into Capshaw's clothing, leading to a frantic off-camera scene that was more chaotic than what appeared in the film. The cultural controversy. Temple of Doom wasn't just banned in India. It created a diplomatic incident that damaged Hollywood's relationship with the world's largest film market for decades. The Indian government was so offended by the film's portrayal of Hindu culture and Indian cuisine that they not only refused filming permits, forcing production to move to Sri Lanka, but also banned the film entirely upon release. The Indian embassy in Washington formally complained to the U.S. State Department about the film's racist portrayal of Indians and Hindu culture. What most don't know is that Spielberg received death threats serious enough to warrant FBI protection for several months after release. "We were naive," Spielberg later admitted. "We didn't do the homework we should have done." The portrayal was so problematic that Lucas and Spielberg were denied filming access in India for future projects, forcing production changes to both directors' subsequent films. The controversy became a case study in cultural sensitivity that's still taught in film schools today. The marriage miracle, Temple of Doom, wasn't just a movie set. It became the unlikely foundation for Steven Spielberg's most successful relationship. When Kate Capshaw walked onto the set for her audition, Spielberg was immediately drawn to her. What audiences don't know is that Spielberg initially rejected Capshaw for the role, but was overruled by George Lucas. George said, "She's the one," Spielberg recalled. He meant for the movie, but it turned out he was right on multiple levels. The relationship didn't blossom immediately. Spielberg maintained professional boundaries during filming, but later admitted he was already falling in love. What's stranger is that Spielberg's previous relationship had ended partly because his ex-partner didn't want to convert to Judaism, while Capshaw, raised Christian, independently decided to convert to Judaism years into their relationship. They married in 1991, remain together today, and have 7 children between them. As Spielberg put it, the most important thing that happened on Temple of Doom had nothing to do with the movie itself.
But you're not eating?
The child discovery. Ke Huy Quan wasn't discovered in a traditional audition. He wasn't even looking to be an actor. The 12-year-old was simply accompanying his brother to the audition for Short Round when casting director Mike Fenton noticed Kay waiting in the hallway and asked him to try reading the lines. "I was just there as moral support," Quan later recalled. "I had no idea what an audition even was." What most don't know is that Quan couldn't speak much English when cast, having arrived in America from Vietnam just a few years earlier. His dialogue was often fed to him phonetically, with Quan memorizing sounds rather than understanding what he was saying. Despite this language barrier, his chemistry with Ford was immediate. Harrison Ford developed a genuine protective bond with the young actor, volunteering to rehearse with him on weekends and advocating for his character to have more substantial scenes. This relationship completely transformed the film, elevating Short Round from sidekick to emotional anchor in a way not originally envisioned in the script. The bridge catastrophe. The film's climactic rope bridge sequence nearly resulted in multiple fatalities. The 300-foot suspension bridge was constructed over a ravine that, while not as deep as it appeared on film, was still dangerous enough that stuntmen refused to film certain sequences as originally planned. What viewers don't see is that a powerful gust of wind during filming caused the bridge to sway violently, throwing 2 crew members off their safety harnesses. They were saved only by catching auxiliary cables during their fall. "We came about as close to a fatal accident as I ever want to experience," Spielberg admitted years later. The scene required multiple bridges, one intact, one designed to break apart, and a third vertical one for close-ups. When the rigged bridge was detonated, debris flew much further than calculated, striking a camera operator and causing a concussion. The chaos of this sequence was so traumatizing that Spielberg completely rewrote the ending of his next film to avoid any similar stunts. The matte painting revolution. The stunning, visually expansive Temple of Doom interiors weren't massive sets. They were groundbreaking combinations of small, partial sets and revolutionary matte paintings by artist Michael Pangrazio. What appeared to be enormous caverns were actually small 30-foot sets extended by hand-painted artwork, so convincing that even industry veterans were fooled. "People still ask me where we found such an enormous cave," Spielberg once noted. "They don't realize most of what they're seeing is paint on glass." What most don't know is that several of the matte paintings were completed just hours before filming, with artists working through the night as the production schedule collapsed. One key painting was literally still wet when filmed, causing a minor crisis when set vibrations threatened to damage the artwork. The technical achievement wasn't just artistic, it was financial wizardry. These matte paintings saved the production an estimated $2 million in set construction costs at a time when the budget was spiraling out of control, essentially rescuing the film from potential shutdown. The monkey brain's deception. The infamous chilled monkey brain scene didn't just disgust audiences, it created lasting misconceptions about Indian cuisine that restaurateurs are still fighting decades later. The scene features a dessert served in a monkey head, complete with exposed brain matter that horrified Western viewers. But here's what audiences don't know. The brains were actually a mixture of custard and raspberry sauce crafted by the prop department. The monkey heads were meticulously created rubber props that took 3 days each to manufacture. "We had a rule that we wouldn't harm any animals," explained special effects supervisor George Gibbs, "but we certainly wanted the audience to believe we had." Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal how this single scene created a measurable drop in Indian restaurant patronage in America for nearly 2 years after the film's release, resulting in an actual lawsuit from a restaurant association that Spielberg quietly settled out of court, the Willie Scott Compromise. Willie Scott wasn't originally written as a screaming, helpless damsel. Kate Capshaw's character was initially conceived as a tough, female version of Indy's friend Sala from Raiders, a smuggler who could handle herself in dangerous situations. The transformation happened after Lucas insisted the character provide greater contrast to Marion from the first film. "I fought for more dimension," Capshaw revealed in a rare interview, "but I was constantly told to just scream louder." What audiences don't realize is that Capshaw actually performed all her own stunts, despite the challenging conditions. The scene where Willie dangles above the lava pit was filmed with Capshaw suspended 150 feet above the studio floor with minimal safety equipment by today's standards. The actor suffered second-degree burns on her hands from the scene where she retrieves the stones from the lava wall as the prop stones were accidentally overheated. Despite her character's reputation, crew members consistently named Capshaw as the most physically courageous performer on set. The dangerous diet. The production of Temple of Doom nearly collapsed not from budget issues or creative differences, but from a devastating bout of dysentery that infected 80% of the cast and crew during filming in Sri Lanka. The illness wasn't just uncomfortable, it was potentially lethal given the remote filming locations and limited medical facilities. "We were dropping like flies," recalled producer Frank Marshall. "At one point, I was the only person well enough to hold a production meeting. The situation became so dire that IVs were set up in several hotel rooms, with doctors making daily rounds to the cast's quarters. What viewers don't see is that several scenes were rewritten to accommodate actors too weak to perform physically demanding sequences. The famous minecart chase, originally planned as a much longer sequence, was shortened because Ford and Capshaw were physically unable to endure filming in the hot, enclosed space. Spielberg himself lost 40 pounds during production and still calls it the worst location shooting experience of my career. The villainous method actor, Amrish Puri, who portrayed the terrifying Mola Ram, wasn't just playing a villain. He became so immersed in the role that he genuinely frightened the child actors on set. Puri would remain in character between takes, speaking in a low, menacing voice and avoiding social interaction with the rest of the cast. The kids would literally run away when he came near them, assistant director David Tomblin recalled. We had to assure them repeatedly that he was just an actor. What most don't know is that Puri, a respected Bollywood star, initially rejected the role 3 times out of concern for how Indians would be portrayed. He only accepted after Spielberg personally rewrote aspects of the character. Despite his menacing performance, Puri was a trained Shakespearean actor who would recite Hamlet's soliloquies between his heart-ripping scenes to mentally reset. The skull headdress he wore weighed nearly 25 pounds and caused severe neck pain, yet Puri refused a lighter version, believing the discomfort enhanced his performance. His dedication created one of cinema's most memorable villains, the miniature masterpiece. The iconic minecart chase wasn't filmed with full-sized carts on actual tracks. It was largely created using miniature models on a 300-foot miniature track built with meticulous detail by ILM's effects team. The sequence took 6 months to film, with each shot requiring multiple takes at different speeds. We built everything at 1/3 scale, explained effects supervisor Dennis Morris, then filmed it at 3 times normal speed to create the illusion of full size. What audiences don't realize is that the scene was never in the original script. It was added after Spielberg visited Disneyland during pre-production and rode the Matterhorn bobsled ride. He was so inspired that he immediately called Lucas and demanded they incorporate a similar sequence. The miniature work was so convincing that many film professionals still believe the sequence was filmed with real minecarts. The integration of miniatures with live action was so seamless that the technique established new standards for action sequences, influencing countless films that followed. The PG-13 creation myth. The widespread belief that Temple of Doom single-handedly created the PG-13 rating isn't entirely accurate. While the film was certainly a catalyst, the truth is more complex. The MPAA had been considering an intermediate rating for years, with Spielberg himself having advocated for one as early as 1979. What pushed the change wasn't just Temple of Doom, but its unfortunate timing with another controversial film. Joe Dante's Gremlins was released just 2 weeks later, creating a 1-2 punch of parents outraged by violent content in PG films. It was a perfect storm, former MPAA President Jack Valenti explained. 2 films that weren't appropriate for children but weren't adult enough for R? The behind-the-scenes reality is that Spielberg wielded his industry influence aggressively, personally calling studio heads to support the new rating. Internal MPAA documents reveal that without Spielberg's advocacy, the PG-13 implementation would likely have been delayed for years. His personal experience with parental backlash transformed American film classification permanently. The secret sequel connection. Temple of Doom isn't just a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark chronologically. It contains deliberate narrative parallels that most viewers miss. Spielberg and Lucas intentionally created a dark mirror of the first film, with each major story beat having a corresponding but twisted equivalent. We wanted to show Indy's journey from self-interest to selflessness, Lucas explained in a rarely cited interview. In Raiders, he begins selflessly and is tempted by greed. In Temple, he starts selfishly but finds his moral core. What audiences don't catch is that the character arcs move in opposite directions. In Raiders, Indy begins as an academic seeking knowledge but is tempted by the ark's power. In Temple, he begins seeking fortune and glory but ends by saving children with no reward. Even the villains mirror each other. The Nazis seek power through religious artifacts, while the Thuggee achieve religious goals through power. This deliberate narrative mirroring explains why Temple of Doom is set before Raiders. It's not just a prequel, but an origin story showing how Indy became the hero we meet in the first film. The Lost Opening. The iconic Shanghai nightclub opening wasn't the original plan for the film. Spielberg had initially shot a completely different sequence set in a Scottish castle, where Indy would battle Chinese villains for a different artifact. The entire sequence was filmed at considerable expense before being scrapped entirely. "We had this whole elaborate chase through a castle," Ford recalled. "Then one day Steven just said, 'This isn't working,' and we started over from scratch." What most don't know is that the Scottish castle footage actually exists in Lucasfilm's vault. The sequence cost nearly $1,083,083 and included a motorcycle chase across the Scottish Highlands and a confrontation on castle battlements. The decision to abandon this footage and create the Club Obi-Wan sequence came just 10 weeks before the film's release date. The last-minute change created a financial crisis that forced cuts to the film's ending, which was originally planned to include a larger battle sequence after the bridge collapse. The Shanghai replacement was conceived, written, and filmed in just 14 days. The brutal rehearsals. The film's elaborate fight sequences weren't just choreographed. They were relentlessly drilled into the actors through a grueling rehearsal process that left many injured before filming even began. Ford, already in his 40s during production, insisted on performing most of his own stunts despite the physical toll. Harrison would rehearse until his hands were literally bleeding, recalled stunt coordinator Glenn Randall. He refused to stop until he got every move perfect. What viewers don't see is that the famous whip work caused numerous injuries to both Ford and the stunt team. The scene where Indy fights the Thuggee guard in the mine took 17 takes, with both Ford and the stuntman suffering bruised ribs and a dislocated finger between them. The physicality wasn't just for show, it was a point of pride for the production. The mine fight sequence alone required 3 weeks of preparation before cameras rolled, with Ford and stuntman Pat Roach practicing for 6 hours daily in sweltering heat. The dedication to physical authenticity is rarely matched in today's CGI-enhanced action films. The genuine panic. The famous bug chamber scene wasn't just difficult for Capshaw, it created a production-wide crisis when several of the 50,000 live insects escaped into the ventilation system of Elstree Studios in London. The infestation became so severe that adjacent sound stages had to suspend filming on other projects. "We had beetles showing up in the commissary food," production manager Patricia Carr revealed. "It became a health hazard." What audiences don't know is that certain insects bred rapidly in the warm studio environment, multiplying faster than wranglers could capture them. Several species established colonies in the studio walls that reportedly persisted for years after production wrapped. Studio employees nicknamed one section of the facility the Temple due to continuing insect sightings. The production had to compensate other films for delays caused by the infestation, adding unplanned costs to an already ballooning budget. Fumigation of the entire studio complex was eventually required, forcing a production shutdown that threatened the film's release schedule. The real-life controversy. The film's portrayal of the Thuggee cult wasn't just Hollywood invention, it sparked academic controversy for its distortion of historical fact. While the Thuggee were a real criminal cult in India that was suppressed by British colonial authorities in the 19th century, they bore little resemblance to their portrayal in the film. The real Thuggee were highway robbers who strangled travelers, explained historian Mike Davis. They weren't heart-extracting cultists with supernatural powers. What's not widely known is that the film's release coincided with rising tensions between Western and Indian scholars over the historical portrayal of the Thuggee. Some Indian academics argued that the Thuggee were largely a colonial invention used to justify British rule, while the film reinforced the most sensationalized version of Thuggee myths. The controversy extended beyond academia. Several Indian American cultural organizations staged protests at theaters, arguing that the film constituted cultural defamation. The National Association of Indian Americans formally requested that Paramount add a disclaimer clarifying the historical inaccuracies, a request that was denied. The darkest secret behind Temple of Doom isn't about production challenges or cultural insensitivity. It's about Steven Spielberg's traumatic childhood experience that directly inspired the film's most disturbing elements. As a child growing up in Phoenix, young Spielberg witnessed something that would haunt him for decades, a neighborhood ritual sacrifice of a small animal that terrified the impressionable boy. "I saw something I shouldn't have seen," Spielberg admitted in a rarely cited interview. "It stayed with me and eventually found its way into this film." What Spielberg has never fully disclosed is that this childhood trauma led to recurring nightmares throughout his life that directly influenced not just the heart-ripping scene, but the entire concept of children being forced to witness horrifying rituals. The film wasn't just entertainment, it was Spielberg's attempt to process his own childhood terror by transferring it to Indiana Jones, who ultimately stops the very thing that Spielberg himself was powerless to prevent as a child. This personal connection explains why Spielberg, despite acknowledging the film's flaws, has always defended its darkest elements. Temple of Doom isn't just an adventure film, it's a deeply personal exorcism disguised as entertainment. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom wasn't just another sequel, it was a troubled production that emerged from personal pain, forever changed film ratings, and created lasting cultural controversies. Yet, despite its problems, or perhaps because of them, it remains one of cinema's most memorable adventures. The film's chaotic production yielded something raw and unfiltered that later, more polished Indiana Jones films couldn't replicate. Temple of Doom reminds us that sometimes the most compelling stories emerge not from smooth production processes, but from the genuine struggles of their creators. If you enjoyed these Temple secrets, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share your own Indiana Jones memories in the comments below. Remember, it's not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your year and the weird facts in your favorite movies.